Top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. It's officially back on. Jake Paul versus Tommy Fury next month, February 26th, will be broadcast live on BT Sport Box Office pay-per-view and in the United Kingdom by way of ESPN Plus pay-per-view.
In the United States.
This news comes to us on the heels of some previous news that Jake Paul is officially done with Showtime and he's entered into a contractual situation with PFL by way of ESPN. This announcement has a different air to it, a different feel to it than when the Jake Paul versus Tommy Fury fight was previously announced on two separate occasions by way of Showtime.
Fight's got more buzz to it now than before.
Set to go down in Saudi Arabia, likely for more money than both Jake and Tommy stood to make trying to do the fight on Showtime. It seems that the Saudis have subsidized the fight.
Jake and Tommy are the beneficiaries of that.
The fight feels somewhat bigger now than it did before. Perhaps it's because it's happening abroad, but it's being billed as a transatlantic pay-per-view. It's a pay-per-view on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean. It's a pay-per-view by way of BT. It's a pay-per-view by way of ESPN.
Feels bigger.
The fight does. I maintain my original position that Jake Paul's tenure at Showtime seems to have hurt his buzz, hurt his momentum. He was actually buzzing more on the Triller platform than when he crossed over to Showtime.
The failing platform.
Their relationship has already ended. It was in June or July of last year that you heard Stefan Espinoza saying that they were going to be in the Jake Paul business for the long haul. Time has proven him wrong, as less than a year to the date he made those comments. Jake's with somebody else now. He's moved on.
He's traded up. He's with the biggest sports network in the country, and he's set to have the Tommy Fury fight they were intended to make, likely for more money than he would have got had it gone down last year by way of Showtime.
Even with Jake Paul's massive social media following, all the notoriety that he's amassed on his own through his exploits, Showtime was unable to garner success in that partnership, and I don't fault Jake Paul for that. I fault Showtime.
The failing platform.
It's like an abyss, a black hole. The buzz he garnered for knocking out Nate Robinson, the buzz he garnered for knocking out Ben Askren, he actually had more of a buzz on the Triller platform than what he garnered on the Showtime platform, which in theory is supposed to be a bigger, more established platform, but you'd never know it based on how things worked out. So Jake Paul has definitely traded up, and he's having the long-awaited, long-anticipated Tommy Fury fight. As far as the fight itself,
Jake Paul has nothing to lose and everything to gain.
he's got nothing to lose. He's never shied away from this fight, you understand. This fight has already been scheduled on two separate occasions, not including this one. And both times, the fight's collapse wasn't due to anything Jake Paul did or anything Jake Paul said. All the issues were on Tommy Fury's end of it. He's never been running from this fight.
He never ran.
I know that technically, neither did Tommy, but all the issues the fight experienced in the past really were on his end of things, from an illness that benched him for a time. You know, he had some kind of chest infection, to being unable to enter into the United States as a result of a ban.
A ban both him and his big brother Tyson Fury is subject to.
You know, the whole Daniel Kinahan thing.
Who knows how long it'll be before that ban is lifted.
Jake Paul has nothing to lose. He goes in there, he either loses a decision to Tommy Fury, or he gets knocked out.
It really wouldn't be as bad for his reputation as it would be for Tommy's if it happened to Tommy. If Tommy Fury loses this fight by way of a points decision or a knockout,
His namesake, his reputation as a pugilist, as a prize fighter, a fighting man, that goes right down the toilet. You're not supposed to lose a fight to a novice boxer, a YouTube influencer that crossed over into the sport late in his...
Tommy Fury loses this fight, his reputation as a serious boxer of any kind,
It's done. It's over.
finito.
That's what's on the line here for Tommy Fury. They do this fight, and if the aesthetic of the match turns out that Jake Paul's having success and he actually doesn't look out of place opposite the ring Tommy Fury, that's a moral victory in and of itself, because Tommy Fury is intended to be the serious pugilist, the serious prize fighter that comes from a fighting family, the Fighting Furies, Tyson Fury, Big Blowhard John Fury.
You can't go in there with this guy.
You can't just go in there with this guy and win. You've got to humiliate him. You've got to embarrass him. You've got to show the world that Jake Paul don't belong nowheres within 50 feet of a ring. And you
got to.
well, your reputation in this sport is finished.
You're finished.
Might as well leave Tommy Fury in Saudi Arabia.
if he don't win this fight, Jake Paul ain't got nothing to lose. But Tommy does. Jake Paul's never shied away from this fight.
Tommy Fury goes in there with Jake Paul, and he can't put him away. He can't knock him out. That's still an indictment on Tommy fucking Fury.
Because he's not supposed to be able to go the distance with you. If he's still standing at the time that the fight is over, even if you win,
you're intended to prove how big a fraud he is and how much he doesn't belong in the sport. I mean, that's the assignment for Tommy Fury, whereas
Jake's a tourist. By all accounts, he's a tourist in the sport.
But if he can go the distance with you, maybe he's not the tourist. Maybe you're the tourist. Maybe you're the one that doesn't belong.
Maybe.
Tommy Fury fucking sucks. I've seen him. There's nothing impressive about him. He doesn't have the look of a blue-chip prospect moving through the ranks.
I already think he's dedicated too much time of what is supposed to be his own professional career to boxing a YouTuber.
How long has he been going at it with this guy? So the very least he can do is win the match.
The least he can do, as the serious professional he's intended to be.
Fight's in late February next month. That's right around the corner when you think about it.
Do you realize how fucking catastrophic it could be for Tommy Fury if he loses this fight? I mean, do you understand?
Do you understand how detrimental it could be for the Fighting Fury name if Tommy fucking Fury loses to this guy?
Better change his name.
He won't be able to walk down the street without getting reminded about it.
For Tommy Fury, it can't be a close fight. For Tommy Fury, it's got to be a blowout and nothing.
It's time to put up a shut up. On the undercut, that same fight, that same show. Reigning defending WBC Cruiserweight champion Lunga Makabu will defend his WBC Cruiserweight World title against former champion Badu Jack.
I gotta say, this is a mildly intriguing fight.
It's been some time since Badu Jack left the shores of PBC Island and relocated over to Dubai, where he is now based out of. He's had a couple of fights out there, a couple of fights since moving up from light heavyweight up to cruiserweight, opposite the ring, mostly pedestrian-level opponents, pedestrian-level competition, sporting a professional record of 27 wins, 3 losses with 3 draws and 16 knockouts, having been knocked out only once, just once. What's working against Badu Jack is that he's not a natural cruiserweight and that he's pushing 40. He's 39 years old here today.
You have to remember, there was a time when Badu Jack used to campaign as a super middleweight.
I believe his final fight at that weight was the James DeGale unification match many years ago, the fight that ended in a controversial draw was not revisited. They never did a rematch. Jack moved up in weight, stayed at light heavyweight for a while.
His final fight at that weight was the Jean Pascal fight of 2019, if you can believe that. It's been that long since those two guys shared the ring. Badu Jack has been campaigning as a cruiserweight ever since, and he's going to be opposite the ring, cruiserweight champion Lunga Makabu.
Lunga, who sports a professional record of 29 wins with just 2 losses, no draws, 25 knockouts, having been knocked out 2 times.
About 4 years younger than Badu Jack, the southpaw.
Hasn't lost a fight since May of 2016 when he was stopped by Tony Bellew. He's on something like a 10-fight winning streak.
So look of it, this guy hasn't lost a fight in the last 7 years. 7.
What's working for Lunga Makaboo is that he is a somewhat younger man than Badu Jack. He is a real cruiserweight, a bona fide cruiserweight. He doesn't need to acclimate to this division, hasn't needed to, the same way that Badu Jack.
He's a bigger puncher by far and wide than Badu Jack, and in many ways, a fresher fighter.
Albeit not as active. In the last 2 years, Lunga Makaboo has only fought once, just once, and that was way back there in January of last year, opposite the ring to Biso Muchunu in their rematch, their second fight.
Lunga Makaboo didn't look good in that fight.
He didn't look good in that rematch, though. He's never looked good opposite the ring to Biso Muchunu, who he's fought at least 2 times. It needs to be said that Lunga Makaboo may have youth and freshness on his side, and he may very well be the naturally bigger puncher by far and wide, but the last 2 years, he hasn't been as active as Badu Jack, and he may have ring rust to shake off the night of the fight.
Badu Jack comparatively fought once in 2020, 2 times in 2021, 2 times last year, against pedestrian-level competition, but better still, he has been fighting.
So he, unlike Lunga Makaboo, won't have any ring rust to shake off next month. I want to say that technically, Badu Jack is the more well-rounded fighter, the more balanced boxer compared to Lunga Makaboo. He is, but Badu Jack's bane has always been that he gets off to a late start, takes him a couple of rounds to get settled in, and he could start off a fight at a great deficit.
How many times have we seen that happen?
Given Lunga Makaboo's natural power as a cruiserweight. Badu Jack may start this fight off on the defensive.
2 wins over Biso Muchuna, who's a solid fighter. A win over Poland's own Mikhail Cieslak. He's a pretty decent fighter. Lunga took his
Took Alexei Popinsko as well, and he knocked out the hard-punching Dmitry Kuzdrayazov.
the Russian hammer.
Got hammered 2019, TKO'd in 5 rounds. The question here today is, do you give a 39-year-old Badu Jack better odds to beat Lunga than those guys?
Do you think here today that a 39-year-old Badu Jack stands a better chance against Lunga than they did?
That's the question. Men's welterweight news, a damning tweet, somewhat of a damning tweet by way of unified welterweight champion Errol Spence Jr., who stated, "Father Time is undefeated. I don't care. It's only a matter of time before he looks his age in the ring."
Is he talking about Terence Crawford?
If he is, that would make this an admission that he is in fact attempting to age him out. Wait until he's older and lost a step before he feels comfortable enough to face him. That's if he's actually talking about Terence Crawford. But because the tweet is open to interpretation, he could very well be talking about this weekend's fight between Artur Beterbiev, who's 38, and Anthony Yard, who's 31.
Areola Spence says that he's got Anthony Yard winning a fight. Could be talking about that.
He might be, because as far as I'm concerned, he's not aging Terence Crawford out because he has no intention and never had any intention of facing him. Thus, aging him out, that doesn't even come into it.
You don't have to age out a guy you have no intention of fighting.
Never had any intention of fighting, and those of you that have been following this channel long enough will already know that I never had faith in this fight. This fight, for the longest time, at least for me, it's been little more than a pipe dream.
I'm not really interested in the career of Errol Spence Jr. If not for this being a boxing news channel where we cover boxing news and relevant stories in the sport, I wouldn't even bother with this guy.
I'm not interested in this guy or his career. He barely fights, and when he does fight, it's not the guy I want to see him in there with.
Last 2 years, this guy's fought a grand total of once.
Shout out all of 2021 and only saw action once last year in 2022 opposite the ring. Yordenis Ugas, as if he's supposed to be an adequate substitute, an adequate parallel for a Terence Crawford. Yordenis Ugas never was and still isn't a pound-for-pound fighter. Terence Crawford is, whether Errol Spence Jr.'s fans like it or not. No one thought of Sean Porter or Yordenis Ugas or Danny Garcia as being of the same ilk as Terence Crawford. Thus, fighting any of them is not an adequate substitute for fighting him.
Hey, you know what Errol's fans like to do? They like to point out all the guys that Terence fought.
Saying that the guys that Terence fought at welterweight aren't as good as the guys that Errol fought at welterweight. You know what? That might actually be true, but the only reason Terence fought those guys is because the other guys froze him out.
So he fought who he could. He fought who was willing.
Come on, we've already had this conversation a million times.
I'm really not interested in playing the blame game because there's no game to play. All the blame goes to Errol Spence Jr., who from the very beginning let it be known that he'd fight 4 people in sequence, and Terence wasn't one among them.
I mean, he said that himself. What more evidence do you need? This more recent set of negotiations? What, you think these people were actually trying to make the fight with Terence after telling all of you that they don't think people would buy the fight? They think people would steal it? That it wouldn't be successful at the box office? And you think these same people were committed to making this fight?
What, are you an idiot?
You must be. As far as I'm concerned, this fight isn't going to happen. And the next super fight in the welterweight division, at least for my money, really is Terence Crawford versus Virgil Ortiz. I mean, that's a fight that I'd get out of bed for.
I don't think Errol Spence Jr. is coming back down from junior middle.
Because why the hell is the Keith Thurman fight happening up there anyway? It's obvious. This guy probably can't even make welterweight anymore.
The truth is, when it comes to that entire situation, a lot of what's been going on is obvious. It's obvious they weren't committed to the fight. It's obvious they never wanted to do it. It was always their plan to take Errol in a different, more lucrative direction. That's why they offered up his head to Canelo Alvarez in order to keep him on Showtime.
Do you think that if Canelo Alvarez agreed to their deal and decided to take on Errol Spence Jr. at a catchweight of some kind, do you think we'd even be here? Do you think
they'd have to scrape Errol Spence Jr. out of the ring with a spatula if he fought Canelo Alvarez?
Guy couldn't put a dent in a fat and flabby Mikey Garcia who jumped up from 135 up to 147. He couldn't put a dent in that guy. Couldn't knock him out. Couldn't even knock him down. Whereas Canelo Alvarez, he's campaigned as high as light heavyweight. Still hasn't been dropped. Still hasn't been stopped. and you think Areola Spence?
His lungs he'd punch out.
Canelo Alvarez would put Errol Spence Jr. in the hospital. The fucking hospital, because Errol ain't the boxer that Floyd Mayweather was.
Errol would be facing a bigger, more experienced Canelo Alvarez, a more seasoned Canelo Alvarez than Canelo used to be.
Had Canelo Alvarez taken up the PBC on that offer and fought Errol Spence Jr., there wouldn't be enough left of Errol Spence Jr. to put in the ring with Terrence Crawford moving forward. Not that that was ever their plan. Not that that's what they were ever looking to do to begin with. This faux set of negotiations, a deal structure.
Come on.
I don't know if Errol Spence was really talking about Terrence Crawford in this tweet, trying to age him out. I don't completely believe that, because that implies that Errol plans on fighting him at some point. And I don't think he does.
I don't think he ever did.
And that faux set of negotiations last year, all of that was just those guys trying to save face. They offered Terrence Crawford a deal they didn't expect him to accept.
They offered him something with the intention of making him walk away due to the deal structure, so that when he does, they can wrap this around his neck and blame him for the fight not happening.
It's very obvious to a clever man, if you're a clever man, but most of Errol Spence Jr.'s fans are quite far, miles away from clever.
That's an understatement.
I think Errol's gonna stay at junior middleweight. And at junior middleweight, there really is no substitute for a Crawford fight. There's no fight he can have at junior middle that has the same profile as the Crawford fight.
He's short of fighting Jermel Charlo, who I don't think he's going to fight. No, there's no fight he can have up there that has the same profile as the Crawford fight. Because what are we talking about? Sebastian Fundora?
There's supposed to be an alternate for a Crawford fight? The fight he's about to have with Keith Thurman. You think anybody's excited about the career? Keith Thurman?
Errol Spence Jr.'s fans can only argue these talking points by either being disingenuous, obtuse, or outright lying.
So look, I don't actually think Errol was referencing Terrence in this tweet. I don't actually think he's talking about aging him out, because aging him out implies that he was planning on fighting him. And as far as I'm concerned, he was never planning on fighting him.
Ever.